Based on the topic, you want to have some kind of red band notification in case you were unaware of what we were going to be talking about. What I really like about the MPAA, the only thing I like about the MPAA is ridiculous terms that they use. These are actual terms that they use. My favorites are mayhem and thematic elements. There's a movie has thematic elements. So here we go, you've been warned. So, is porn art? So in creating the presentation, I quickly realized this is a much larger topic with a lot of subtopics. I could easily fill a university course. So this is a really abridged edition. So in order to have this discussion, we need to define a couple of things. Merriam-Webster defines art as the conscious use of skill and creative imagination, and works so produced. So next we need to ask, what is the purpose of art? There really isn't one general consensus. Picasso's is actually my favorite, but there are a few common ideas, and by no means is this list complete. So, to be historical records, to promote and share ideas or propaganda, to satisfy ego, to decorate, entertain, shock, to teach, to exhibit skill. Then we have to define pornography. So the term pornography actually didn't come into common use until the mid-19th century. And it originally meant the discussion of prostitutes, by prostitutes. And then, of course, it has since morphed into something a little more robust. Before that, we used erotica, depending on which side of the debate you were on. Obscenity was common. So now, as for the purpose of porn, it's not always been just about inciting sexual feelings. It was often used in satire and to deliver political or religious critique. This is an image of Marie Antoinette, who was so affectionately named as the royal dildo. But when people want to have the intellectual discussion on sexuality depicted in art, they often call it erotica, or in this case, fashion photography. Because erotica carries a positive connotation, but when you want to speak about it negatively, it's called porn. People use the word porn. It was often considered art until ideas of public morality started coming into the picture, and I'll get into explaining around where that happened in a bit. This image actually is a photo by a fashion photographer known as Horst, who shot for Vogue. It is known as the Mainbacher corset. You've probably seen it either in its original format or played upon. There's an Italian painter and art theorist named Michelangelo Pistoletto, and his definition of the purpose of art: the artist must be the sponsor of thought in whatever endeavor people take on at every level. So it goes that sex is part of those endeavors. Porn is made and has been made with the same amount of skill and materials as any other object that's been considered art, and often by the same artists who made publicly more respectable work. It is still generally excluded from the larger catalogs of conversation about art. This is one of the temples of Khajuraho, if I don't pronounce that properly, in India, created in the 1st century. It includes depictions of everyday life, and many of those depictions of everyday life include bending over with people inside you. Sounds fabulous. Art, porn, and erotica can be differing sides of the debate, but often have also been interchangeable. As poet, performer, and publisher Gloria Leonard said, the difference between erotica and pornography is light. It's pretty succinct. Okay, so I'm going to take you on a very basic and quick history of porn through the ages. So, but what you'll probably notice is a trend in that, especially during the middle part of the timeline, porn or erotica was largely white and heteronormative. Now, that's an interesting study in itself, and Jimmy has its own talk, which is not to do one. Okay, so this rock engraving is believed to be the world's first engraving ever, and it just so happens to be of a vulva. There's a little circle with a little slit in it. Venus figurines. They were created with exaggerated sexual organs, and the voluptuous figures were fertility icons, so really made to incite sexual feelings. Stone tablet, the Mesopotamian epic of Gilgamesh, which had some pretty racy passages about seduction. The Lysistrata, a play about the women of Greece withholding sex from the men until they negotiated peace during the Peloponnesian War. These drawings are not part of the original. These were done by Norman Lindsay in the 20th century. The Satyricon, a Roman text of male lust, again, also drawings from Norman Lindsay. And the Warren Cup, which is a silver-encrusted Roman drinking cup surrounded by an image of more male lust. Roman sculpture of Pan, copulating with a goat, as one does when they're a goat dog. The Kama Sutra, everybody knows, it was actually originally written without any accompanying imagery. It's a sexual manual and guide to gracious living. So they know their shit. Japanese shunga. It actually was art originated in China, painted on large silk scrolls, and also pillow books, which were kind of like diaries, which had really erotic, real passages about what they were doing. Shunga translated actually means pictures of spring, and spring is often a metaphor for sex. Then we have the Dark Ages, occurring after the fall of the Roman Empire. Not much created or recorded of any type of work, much less that of an erotic nature. Lasted quite a few centuries. And then we have the Renaissance and all its color and glory and fleshy goodness. This is Hieronymus Bosch's Bosch Garden of Earthly Delights. It's quite lewd when you look up closer. E. Modi, 16 Pleasures, which is an erotic book depicting 16 specific positions. These images actually came shortly around the same time. They were in a second edition. And things started to really heat up around the 17th century, especially in France. The Enlightenment probably had a really good hand in this. L'École des Filles caused quite the coup with its racy text and imagery. Then we reach the 18th century and are introduced to the madness of Marquis de Sade. Some pretty depraved shit. At least he was honest. During the French Revolution, there was much use of political porn to attack the church state, as we saw earlier with the image of our royal dodo, Pomeranian. Mass production at the same time saw a massive rise in erotic postcards. Still to this day, actually, all French postcards. Another paper ephemera. After this, there really wasn't any turning back. In 1836, we had the first filmed kiss. It was actually shot by Thomas Edison. I put a clip. Just want to stand. So these were two actors from the stage show The Widow Jones. They were asked to recreate the kiss. So here they are actually, I guess, discussing what they're about to do. Very sweet. Here it goes. Here it comes. So cute. Okay, some people freaked the fuck out. There's a well-known Chicago publisher, Herbert Stone, who said, manifested to gargantuan proportions and repeated 3 times over, says Oliver, it's absolutely disgusting. Such things should call for police interference. Then there was Manet's Olympia, which caused its own stir because though it was very similar, so Olympia's on the right there, though it was very similar to Titian's Venus of Urpino, which was actually painted over 300 years previous, Olympia had the gall to be, as a subject, had the gall to be a prostitute. And that didn't go over too well, and a lot of people called for its destruction. Mass production, again, shows itself in this case daguerreotype and calotype photography, which is a metal plate process. And it shows how erotica is one of the first products of new technologies. You see, porn is unstoppable. And once halftone printing came into play, that was it. As a way to hide in plain sight, publishers created naturist or art magazines, fooling absolutely no one. Curious photo editing on the nudist. One man has his genitals removed. And your male nudes weren't really shown or tolerated a lot. I'm sure much to the chagrin of many women and some men. Unfortunately. Then we had the English photographer Edward Muybridge, who did photographic motion studies, and many of his studies were of nude figures. This is one of his first, of two women kissing. It's actually, if you ever find it as kind of like a zoetrope, it's really interesting to see. Then we have the first porn film. Of course, it's French. It's called Après le bal. Then we have no music. No music, although for some reason I think, the ragtime piano moved really fast. And it takes forever to get to it because they wore so many clothes. And even at this point it's considered very racy because she's essentially still completely covered, but the fact that you actually see the shape of her legs is so risque. One of these days, really not this much either. What's really interesting here is that she still faces away from the camera, and if you look really closely, you can see she's still wearing kind of like a fresh-colored leotard to not display anything. And the representation of water as sand is really curious. I'm thinking maybe the idea of wet clothing and see-through wet clothing was probably a little too much. I have neighbors. See, I did it! Alright, then we hit the 20th century with crazy amounts of published works like Tijuana Bibles, which are like these little tiny subversive illustrated booklets that were considered to be the first underground comics. Then came the fabulousness of beefcake magazines, illustrated here by Thomas Finland. If you don't know who Thomas Finland is, look him up because his artwork is absolutely stunning. Actually, Finland just put out a whole bunch of commemorative stamps, so if you have a chance to get those. And then another revolution hits with the first instant camera, invented by the Polaroid founder Edwin Land. This was actually called the Land camera. I can't even guess at the quantity of shots taken during the dirty Polaroid genre. I'm sure like one of the first 10 shots were of somebody naked. Dirty Polaroids are actually some of my favorite. I still shoot that Polaroid a lot of fun. And of course we had the first hetero male mags that were shamelessly born at this time. The first one was Modern Man. The next one was Playboy a year later. Playboy was popularized with the term, I waited for the articles. Which is like, see, we're still art. Then we had Deep Throat, which was the first mainstream porn film. You have to remember that porn was still shown in theaters. This wasn't a personal endeavor. It caused quite the stir. Some people loved it, some people hated it. Some wouldn't admit to seeing it. There were obscenity trials involved. The star Linda Lovelace would later denounce the film as film rape. And it's also horrible. Then we have the wider democratization of porn with the invention of the first video camera. The porn age exploded with VHS sales during the 70s and 80s, and what's known as the golden age of commercial porn. DVDs carried a bit, kind of pumping along for a little bit until the advent of the internet. Now nobody really pays for porn anymore, much to my chagrin as a porn producer. And it's no longer the multi-billion-dollar industry it once was. And with the growing acceptability of sexual pleasure, we now have things to accompany our porn watching. Sex toys have replaced porn videos as kind of the market to get into, respective designers. And studios are being called upon to create the sexiest toy. And there's some really nice ones out there. It makes me very happy as a former designer and current sex man. There's actually a really beautiful chess set. All the chess pieces are toys. It's $7,000 worth. All right, so that's our timeline. We saw the rise of Christianity through Europe in the Middle Ages, which made good its apparent mandate to attach shame to representations of sex and nudity. Unless, of course, it was an image of the Virgin Mary. And no one has ever masturbated to an image of a nude virgin before. There were consequences like the year-long imprisonment of the author of I Modi by the Pope. And then things started to go really batshit crazy with laws and groups in Europe. In the later 18th century, we had the proclamation of the discouragement of vice, which demanded no excessive drinking, blasphemy, profane swearing, cursing, lewdness, or other immoral practices. So in effect, no fun. This led the way to the society, this is their symbol for the suppression of vice. I actually want to get that on a t-shirt. And then it came to the US, where it got a lot worse, and led the way to the Vagrancy Act, where you couldn't publicly post obscene print pictures or other indecent exhibitions, which meant no more sculptures, no more gallery shows, no more murals on the side of your estate to show how wealthy and dirty you were. This led to the Obscene Publications Act, making all obscene material illegal, and obscene, of course, being very subjective for those in authority. And one of the worst and most harmful laws to come out of all of this, and we're still feeling the ramifications of it, are the Comstock laws in the US. Anthony Comstock was a nut and a big one who had a big mouth and good social contacts. His laws prevented the delivery of anything obscene through the US Postal Service, and this included anything about sex education, Planned Parenthood, safe-sex pamphlets. So we're still feeling that today. These laws became way more aggressive with mass production, because essentially mass production meant mass corruption. And things reached a head in 1976 with the film Snuff. Now, does everybody know what a snuff film is? Snuff film is apparently the real depiction of a sexually explicit murder on film. There has been no proof that one actually has ever been made, but people thought that this was real. It was an Argentine and US co-production that gave the impression that it was a real snuff film. It caused such a stir that the anti-porn faction of the feminist movement lost their shit and joined forces with the religious right to protest anyone who would listen, and government was a big part of that group. So began the porn wars, also known as the sex wars, that lasted about 15 years, right up into the 90s. And their main message was that porn was nothing except violence against women. It is not art, nor is it healthy sexual expression. And theirs was also actually a very heteronormative argument, ignoring all other sexualities. And they completely ignored the idea that many women enjoyed watching it and even participating in it, even though they had people coming to them, telling them so. So the anti-porn campaigners during the porn wars, Andrea Dworkin and Catherine McKinnon. Now we have Gail Dines, who's insane, but very well educated, very well spoken, very well funded, and has a very big mouth. You can probably tell that I don't like her very much. One of the biggest issues, alongside the old ones that Dworkin and McKinnon were promoted, is that she cannot stand the fact that people make money off sexually charged imagery. Yet all her books, Pornland, and all her lectures use the very same images. So she can make money off the images, just not others who enjoy them. And she actually probably makes more money off the porn business than most porn performers do. She was actually at a talk yesterday in Halifax that I wanted to go protest. So on the pro-porn side, we had Ellen Willis and Gail Rubin. They were the ones fighting during the sex wars against Dworkin and McKinnon. Today there's a huge list of people that have come up, especially since the 60s, to fight for freedom of speech and sexual expression, and to further discussion on porn as a legitimate form of art, subversion, education, and expression. Toronto is actually becoming a really good hub for the feminist pro-porn movement. With the Feminist Porn Awards, Carlisle Jansen, who was one of the founders of Good for Her, has brought that to the fray, and it's about to hit its 10th year, and actually won one earlier this month. And the Feminist Porn Conference, which I dare you to attend and not leave with a fresh understanding of desire, art, and identity. One of the best conferences of any topic I've ever attended. Thanks to the internet, those in the industry, both for and against, have found that it can become part of the larger conversation that was formerly reserved for academics in stuffy old buildings. But because of that, because of all that, and the democratization of it all, so continues the fallout of the anti-porn faction. And out of that is now the anti-masturbation movement. So we have 1 million men, which has a Facebook following of less than 1,000 people. And no fap is really interesting. These sites have instructional videos that telling fapstronauts, so those who masturbate are called fapstronauts, and of course they're all men only. to avoid nature, essentially, by all means necessary. Their tutorials are crazy. Because of course, porn will make you blind, impotent, a cheater, dirty, bound for hell, you're gonna reach. So the anti-porn movement has had perhaps the unintended consequence of being a leader of the anti-sex education movement. And this is a huge problem. So we see now that sometimes scary and sometimes hilarious side of online debating and commenting on this site, debate-wise. The question was posed, does erotic equal pornographic? And they list the top 3 and top 4 answers. Top 4th, I like porno. Sounds very intellectual conversation response. And other sites and forums produce answers like, porn is symbolically flat, and watch porn at 14 and become desensitized by sex by the time you're 20. Now, these aren't unique responses. They're actually very representative of the current ideas of sex, and this is thanks largely to the anti-porn campaigners. So the prevailing ideal that you get from these forums is that porn is made to get you off, and which means it's not art, it's considered porn at that time. But of course, all forms of art have an opportunity to get you off, whether, if it's not sexually, then it's emotionally, psychologically. Movies are made to incite some kind of reaction. All art is made to incite some kind of reaction, but apparently we have to be careful of just what that reaction is. We can be moved to be sad, to be scared, to be happy, but apparently we can't be moved to be horny. Unless, of course, it's a movie like this. That's supposed to be a vase. Everybody got all hot and bothered by this scene. It was a mainstream movie. Rest in peace, Patrick's movie. We actually don't see a lot of flesh in this scene, and it was considered extremely racy. So we can all expect that he slipped it in, but God forbid that we actually be shown it. So simulated sex is okay, but real sex is considered really offensive. And this video sums it up quite nicely.
Hey! Hi. My agent just called. I got offered the coolest part. It's not a ton of dialogue, but it's gonna be so great for me, I know it.
What is it?
So basically my character's in this ratty apartment, and this guy I'm seeing comes in, and he's like, get down on all fours. And I'm like, okay. And I start crawling, and he follows me into the bedroom, and then he flips up the back of my skirt and starts eating my ass. So he's screaming.
So it's this huge bonfire orgy, but we're all naked with these pitch black eyes, and we're just going at it like animals. There are like a lot of people in this scene, but because I'm doing my girl from behind, you can totally see my entire face.
So I'm sucking the midget guy's dick when his brother comes in, and he watches for a second, but then he's like, hurry up or whatever, and then he sends in 4 naked women to join.
Yeah, it's just a few lines, but you get to have sex with the lead. It's set in the 1930s though, so they want to know if your hoo-ha is shaved in case they need to get you a merkin.
A merkin?
A wig for your vagina.
And at the exact same time, we all start climaxing and we're just screaming.
What's wrong? Who is it?
Over, he starts jerking off over my chest, and I'm like, no, not on my dress, not on my dress. So I pull down the top of my dress, and he just shoots it all over my tits, and I'm—
Where's hot vampire number 1?
Hi, it's Kate, actually.
Whatever, just go over the bed and tear off your robe.
Hold on. Kelly, sweetheart, you just got a role in a porn.
You're doing porn? Porn?
Porn.
You did a fucking porn.
What? No, it's HBO.
Oh! Oh, I love you so much.
I'm so proud of you. Oh.
Oh, thanks, Mom.
And action!
It's not porn.
It's HBO.
With 108 Emmy nominations, it's not porn, it's HBO.
So we have comments like this. Porn doesn't challenge one's mind with intellectual concepts. Thank you, wacky wall-walker. But comments like this infuriate me because porn has actually been directly or indirectly challenging concepts of religion, politics, gender, race, sexuality, class for centuries. But people have been judging between that and what's obscene for ages with varying levels of success. U.S. Justice Stewart, in an obscenity case about, yeah, you know the French film, The Lovers, said that he would know it when he saw it. But trying to gauge what's dangerously, erotically charged is a tall order. When one man's stuffy is another man's kink. So if you don't know what furries are, look it up. Google that shit. So contemporary ideas of what's art and what's porn, what's corruption and what's corruptible have gotten out of hand. As larger companies place great stakes in our public venues, the censorship of sexuality expands. So your Facebook, Instagram, Vine, Flickr, and Tumblr all have very harsh terms of service in what's considered pornographic or obscene. This photo of a woman's elbow was banned from Facebook because it resembled a nipple. There were threatening pieces of flesh with nipples. Yet racism, homophobia, and misogyny can run pretty freely on the platform, which was actually one of the reasons why I left Facebook. So on top of all these social media platforms, we have the financial institutions that also censor really heavily. PayPal, Chase Payments, they're in the news lately, they're getting a lot of flack. Kickstarter, they all forbid adult content to the point of forbidding people who merely work in the industry but don't actually use the platforms for adult content. What these companies refuse to recognize is that if it weren't for porn, they wouldn't exist. Porn was the first industry to figure out online credit card processing. So if you read Passion Barr's book, it outlines the contributions that porn has made throughout the years. Really quite fascinating. So the idea that art being subjective is an important and valid discussion, but you can't have that discussion to the exclusion of porn, especially not when so much of it has been made. Since sexual arousal and human nature are all that endeavor that are still considered legitimate just like any other. So yes, there's good porn and there's bad porn, and oh, there's so much bad porn of it. Bad porn, so much so that I actually don't watch porn anymore. I make it, I just don't watch it. This scene is from Caligula, which is so delightfully fucked up and really racy. I sometimes actually prefer the stuff that pretends not to be porn, but it actually is porn. It's got Malcolm McDowell in it and Helen Mirren. Helen Mirren! But the dearth of the imperfect, that imperfect content, or even the immoral content, doesn't change the fact that this is still all art.